We are in chapter 26. As we have described, one of the ways that we can understand Tanya is like in themes. In fact, Rabbi Shais Taub has made a chart. We have it here in Shul. It's a very nice illustration of different themes. And this chapter begins a new theme. So let's just quickly recap. The first couple of chapters of Tanya set out just to, like I like the analogy, to understand the pieces of the chessboard. What are the spheroids? What are the garments? And so on. And then we talk about their tussle in the chapters about the tzaddik, the Beinoni, and the Russia, or the Russia and then the Beinoni. And then we talk about the strategy that the Alter Rebbe describes as the long short way. It takes a long time to master, but once you master it, it is immediately accessible. And that is essentially to use your, I like the word power of imagination or intellect or chachma, to recognize that there's more than just what is staring me in the eye at this moment, the infinity of Hashem. And our impulse will intuitively be to associate with that infinity of Hashem, which will then lead to transforming our character and resulting in change behavior. Think it, feel it, do it. And then, starting in about chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe says, well, what am I supposed to do until then? Since that is a long, short way, and I got to, quote, pay the bills today, meaning I have to take care of business today, what is recommended for me in this moment? And that is the short, long way, which runs from chapters 18 to chapter 25, which we finished last week, which is that we appeal directly to the character. We underscore the impact of every Avera as a mechanism for us to resist the temptation, and we alert you to the trickery of the Nefesh HaBahamis that essentially argues, come on, it's not such a big deal. Don't be so melodramatic. And we pushed back and said, it is such a big deal. And yes, every Avera is essentially an entire Avera, a disruption of our relationship with the infinity of Hashem. And now, here in chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe is going to be speaking about the necessity for enthusiasm in our service of Hashem. That is, it's really linked to our attitude. Now, on the one hand, we say, yes, well, people know that Hasidim are joyous and celebratory and so, but what does that really mean? One might make the argument, not you, of course, that serious people are glum and morose and serene because they understand all the troubles of the world. And being happy is equivalent with being naive or almost foolish and silly and Pollyanna and unaware. Don't you know all the horrors of life? So, what then is happiness? Well, we might argue there is the happiness of the moment, as some wise person once said. If you want to be happy for a moment, listen to a song. You want to be happy for an hour, eat a delicious meal. If you want to be happy for a week, go on a cruise, which, as we pointed out, is like prison, except you could drown. And if you want to be happy for a month, buy a new car. But those happinesses come and go. All sensory stimulation is there for as long as it lasts, and then it's gone. True happiness is not about being naive, and it's not about having more toys than the next guy. It is about a general attitude. And therefore, while we use the word happiness and simcha, it is linked to the idea of zrizos, to be focused, to be driven, to be enthusiastic. And this is the hallmark of the message of Tanya. And not just because Hasidim like to dance and sing and so on, and they don't want to be a bump on a log, although there's a significance to that, not to be underestimated. It is also a deliberate strategy for how one can be in a celebratory way in the service of Hashem. Now, later on, in what the book that we call Tanya, which remember is really a compilation of numerous books, there is the series of letters that is called Igeres HaTshuva, the letters that detail the character of tshuva. And one of the first things that the Alter Rebbe does to disrupt the standard conventional wisdom, much as he does with disrupting the conventional wisdom of what a tzaddik, a Beinoni, and a Russia are, that they're not just a really good guy, a horrifically wicked guy, and an average guy. The Alter Rebbe has a similar tactic in the Igeres HaTshuva, and like I'm calling it, the conventional wisdom or the standard way of thinking about it, which the Alter Rebbe disabuses us of, is that tshuva is about being sad and morose and self-mortifying and so on. Now, while we understand that sort of intuitively just from our own life experience and in the teachings of Chassidus, and that the Alter Rebbe says it, it is important for us to recognize that that was, in fact, and still is in many communities, the conventional wisdom. That on Yom Kippur we should be weeping and crying, and on the idea of tshuva is about being sad. Now, again, it's not to be Pollyanna and dismissive and say, "Oh well, as you win some, you lose some," or anything that's in any way dismissive. We understand the severity of Avera, but the trick or the deviousness of sadness is that if it's not properly modulated, it becomes despondence. That is, what's the point of even trying? No matter what I do, I can't do anything right, so I give up. So in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to come out for enthusiasm and, again, the attitude, which the Alter Rebbe will take to the extreme in the addressing of what I call the question, which is the only question that people really have, namely, why is there suffering? Why can't everybody just be happy all the time? Why can't everybody just have money and friends and health and all the things that they need? And the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us not why, but how to deal with it, and that our attitude can transform the circumstance. And the Alter Rebbe is going to be pushing back against what I'm calling again this conventional wisdom that serious people are glum and know the weight of the world, and therefore are, generally speaking, so to speak, saddened. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to quote a chapter 51 from Tehillim, and is going to focus on two different verses, Pasuk 19 and Pasuk 10. So I'm going to put it here on the screen, and hopefully you could see it. You see here, I hope you can see here, Pasuk 19. This is chapter 51. It says, Zivchei Elokim, the offerings of God, are a ruach nishbara, a broken spirit, leiv nishbar, a broken heart, the nitcha, and a crushed heart, Elokim lo yisivzeh, God will never despise. Now, this pretty clearly seems to be advocating for, again, broken heart, not in the sense that I'm disappointed, but to feel like a broken person and to feel saddened and so forth, certainly seems to be advocated for here by King David in verse 19. And the Alter Rebbe is going to address this. Now the Alter Rebbe is also going to be quoting for us from Pasuk 10, which is here. So in Pasuk 10, it says, make me hear joy and gladness, let the bones that you crushed exult. Tasmieni sosain v'simcha, again, make me hear joy and gladness, tigelna, and we should celebrate atzmas dichis, the bones that you have crushed. So these two verses, chapter 51, verse 19, and chapter 51, verse 10, are going to be discussed in some great detail here in this chapter. So here we go. Perek Chavav, chapter 26, Baram. Now, as we have pointed out many times, when we start a new chapter, the first thing we look for is, does it begin with the letter Vav? The letter Vav means and whenever a chapter begins with the letter Vav, the suggestion is that it's a continuum on this theme. The fact that this chapter does not begin with the letter Vav, it begins with a sort of deviating word, Baram, however, is the indicator that we are starting a new concept. A new theme is being begun, has begun, or whatever, here in this chapter. And again, this is what I talked about. The Tanya is going to be detailing the mechanism through which we can overcome the negativity and the surrender and the despondence. And that is through crowding it out with joy. And again, joy is not naive foolishness. It's not unawares of holiness and of the troubles of the world, but it is an attitude, and it's not an attitude that is dismissive of suffering. Kugoinda, in such a circumstance, Tzarich la'oidei klal gadol. You must be aware. And again, that word to know doesn't just mean I know it, like I happen to know the capital of a country, but that this word das means that I have personalized it. I have internalized this awareness. And this is a klal gadol. Now, the term klal gadol is one that we've seen before here in Tanya. It's a standard term that we find in Torah scholarship. Perhaps the most famous one is Rabbi Akiva, who said that love your neighbor as yourself is the klal gadol b'Torah. And what it means is not that it's just, quote, the most important rule or a very important rule or a primary rule. It means it is the prism through which we see the world. The world should be seen through this perspective. That's what it means. Klal gadol. It should be seen through this lens. And what is that lens? Just like in any pursuit for something physical. So yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My screen is flickering on and off a lot, and
Yeah,
if
mine is too. I don't know
anyone,
if it's
okay,
Yeah,
but
Oh,
it's not,
mine
I,
too. Mine too.
I
okay,
thought it was just
it's
me.
nothing
Okay.
personal. Yeah, I'm getting it also. I don't know if it's the internet or it's the
Oh.
gremlins or if it's the Yetzer Hara or it's Trump. I don't know what it is, but it's we're gonna fight through it. I'm getting it too. I don't know
okay,
what it is, but
It's like old TV.
okay.
yeah, right. Whack it on the side. That'll fix it. Okay. So the general principle which the Alter Rebbe is describing here is comparable to what we know, and again, maybe this is more male than female, but when you have two people competing for something, that one person wishes to be victorious against another person. Like when you have two people who are wrestling and they are literally dusting it up amongst each other. They are quarreling with each other and dusting it up with each other. See if that helps. No, it doesn't. Okay. And it's dusting it up amongst each other. So, hine ima echad hu ba'atzlis ukvedis yinutzuch bekal b'yipol gam im hu gibor yoyse mechaverei. Then, if one of them is lazy or not focused or fixated, then they will be toppled, even if they are mightier than their opponent. Even if they are stronger than their opponent, they will be toppled if they don't put in the effort. So it's all in your attitude. If your attitude is sluggish, you could be toppled. Now, curiously, this analogy, which the Alter Rebbe gives, of two people dusting it up, literally, or wrestling, which is reminiscent of the wrestling of Yaakov and the man, the stranger, who of course turns out to be the angel of Esav. And we know that Yaakov and Esav, from literally gestation, were described as the two forces that live within their mother, which is representative of the two forces that live within each of us, that they are in absolutely close proximity, that the two of them have to be engaged. And this is one of the core messages that we know from general, and in Tanya, we have talked about it a lot. Why can't the Yetzer Hara do Yetzer Hara things and the Yetzer Tov do Yetzer Tov things? Or perhaps a simpler illustration would be let the animal soul do animal soul things, eating, drinking, sleeping, and the godly soul do godly soul things, Torah, mitzvahs, kindness, and so on. And, half a day for you, half a day for him. Render unto Caesar, this type of thing. And the message of Chassidus is no, that we are not going to surrender the quote regular things to the animal soul and to have the godly things go to the godly soul. So an hour in godliness and an hour in regular things, even if those regular things are regulated by law, so you have to eat kosher food. But when I'm eating the kosher food, I'm eating like an animal. That is, I'm just eating for the impulse of satiating my hunger. No, we are insisting that they, like the two wrestlers, be so ingrained that the godly soul wants to orchestrate the eating just like it wants to orchestrate the davening. And so, this analogy of the two wrestlers underscores that the two forces are in absolute cohesion or close proximity, maybe the better way of saying it, with each other. You recall that back in chapter 9, the Alter Rebbe quoted an analogy from King Solomon about two kings fighting over the city. And the city is represented or represents our entire being. And the two kings, each of them wants exclusive dominion. Just like in the battle, they want all the people to be obedient to them. They want all the natural resources, etc. So too, the animal soul and the godly soul each wants the total elimination of the other. However, here in chapter 26, the mashal is not that one is aspires to destroy the other, only that it should topple it. Why? Because now that we understand that the Beinoni is not likely to ever be able to completely eradicate the animal soul, and certainly the animal soul can never eradicate the godly soul. So now we have sort of a little bit shifted our objective. Whereas in chapter 9, where we were talking about tzaddikim, we were talking about the goal, again, we should certainly shoot for it and strategize and try to achieve it, that the animal soul should be destroyed and that every resource of the person should be completely aligned with the king of the godly soul. But here we're just hoping for the toppling, the animal soul should be toppled by the godly soul. We have, I don't want to say surrendered, but we have shifted our attention from trying to completely eradicate the animal soul to being able to only, again, control, dominate, topple the animal soul from the godly soul. So here the
Rabbi
Alter Rebbe,
Epstein,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
sure.
Yesterday in your wife's women's class on Shabbos, we read a sikha, which was directly related to everything that we're talking about right now.
Okay.
And it was about, in the month of Adar and bringing joy. And so I'm really bad at repeating it, but something about even with a court case, you
To
nor
try to direct it to this month.
correct. And that was relating to exactly what you're talking about with the animal soul and the godly soul. But that was the question because we were wondering, like, normally we thought you want to eliminate it. And that's what you're
That's our whole
talking about
ultimate goal.
here. Right.
Yeah, correct. Right, but that's really the purview of the tzaddik, and again, not likely that most people will be able to achieve it. We
Right.
strive for it. We go through strategies to try and touch it, but it's not an expectation. It is an aspiration.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we discussed, even then, we always have this question: since the godly soul has God's divine assistance, as you recall that we quoted from the Psalms that said that God stands at the side of the weak one to give it victory, meaning the animal soul has an advantage. First of all, every morning I know that I exist, which is very animal soul-ish. And certainly a baby is completely self-absorbed. And it's only at adulthood, bar and bas mitzvah, that a person's godly soul really is present. We don't expect a child to truly be selfless. I mean, we try and train them, but when they become bar and bas mitzvah, that means that their godly soul now has impact upon them. And that means that now they can do good things, because of course a child can do good things, but they can do it for the good reason that is to be selfless. And that's a struggle. And of course, the whole world is constantly stimulating my animal soul. It's not appealing to my godly soul. And I have to eat. So that's another animal soul win. So we might think, how is it possible for the godly soul to ever win? He's got so many disadvantages. And the answer is, well, he has Hashem on his side. So then we swing the question back in the reverse. Since he has Hashem on his side, so how can he ever lose? He's got God on his side. Isn't he invincible and isn't he impenetrable because he's got God on his side? Well, the pushback to that is he's got God on his side if he will allow God to help him. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, that just like in the analogy of two physical wrestlers in battle, that even if one is stronger than the other, if the stronger one, like we would say, doesn't have his heart in it, he's not enthusiastically invested in the behavior, so he's going to be toppled by the weaker opponent. So the godly soul has all of the strength. It has the divine assistance. In other words, unfortunately, no excuses. We can't say I'd love to, but we have. So what is within our hands is, again, I keep coming back to the word, our attitude. If you have a positive attitude, and I don't just mean you have some sort of Pollyanna, you get yourself there. There are always going to be people who are more talented, and that's not within your capacity to control. And there's always going to be people who have other advantages. The one thing that's in your control is your enthusiasm. This is a derivative of the law that when Moshe Rabbeinu says, "What is it that that Hashem asks of you? Only that you shall fear Him." So the Gemara says, from here we deduce that the only thing you can truly control is your attitude, your reverence for Hashem. You can't control who your parents are. You can't control where you were raised. You can't control your physical health to certain degrees, your natural health. But what you can control is how hard you're going to work, how enthusiastic you're going to be in implementing your talents and skills, and that is the characteristic that we are describing here. So even if I'm mightier, tortoise and the hare, if I'm lazy, I'm not going to make it to the finish line. So the Alter Rebbe continues, so too in the victory of the Yetzer Hara. It is impossible, which is a pretty harsh term that the Alter Rebbe is using here. It is impossible to defeat it, be'atzlis ukvedos. And there's two words here that are going to be important. They sound a little bit similar. They have a certain similarity, but they're not etymologically related. This one is atzlis. Atzlis we translate as laziness. Kvedos is heaviness. Hanimsheches, which is a derivative from atzvus, which again, and atzvus, they commonly translate it as depression, but I want to avoid that word only because I think in our society we have a different understanding of what depression means than just being down in the dumps. There is a biochemical characteristic that is depression. We're not talking about that. That is not the mission of Tanya, to diagnose people's personality disorders and so forth, which I'm not dismissing. So the word that I would like to use for that is despondence. Basically, I give upness. Give upness is defeatism and surrender. Now that is the mental attitude that results in the physical manifestation of laziness or heaviness. Laziness has got a certain moral character, which we are applying here, but we're talking here more in the manifestation than we are in the source of it. So atzlis is sluggishness, kvedis is heaviness, and they are a derivative of atzvus, of this despondence and so on. Now, again, it's important to remember that the Alter Rebbe is in many ways offsetting unfortunately, well, I would say unfortunately, but a somewhat prevalent character trait or understanding, again, that serious people are glum, and they walk around with this like heaviness upon them. And whenever you look at them, they communicate this concept. Again, it's not some sort of act, because yeah, sure, I could sit and read all the horrible things and then become very heavy by it. And then there has to be pushback. And again, we're not advocating for some sort of false naivete of happy-go-luckiness. So here we go. The timtum alev ke'evan, and when his heart is as stuffed up as a stone, like Paro, his heart is hardened, means he has no get up and go. He's got no vigor, no pep in his step, and all of that kind of thing. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is advocating. You got to have enthusiasm in your behavior. You got to be passionate about what you're doing. And that is the key to unlock the essential greater power. Now, again, it's important to recognize if you say, well, I want to be a concert pianist and I'm going to practice 10 hours a day. Well, if you don't have the natural dexterity and flexibility and ear for it and so on, you may play the piano, but it's not a mitzvah to be a piano player. So this is not some sort of high school pep talk that you can be anything you want to be. We're telling you that you have the capacity to defeat the Yetzer Hara every moment. Why? Because the Yetzer Tov, the Nefesh Elokis, is aligned with the infinity of Hashem. What do you have to do? You have to unlock it. How do you unlock it? You unlock it by having this positive approach, by having this simchadik approach. And there are numerous letters where the Rebbe recommends that people should learn this chapter if they ask, what can I do for this sense of despondence? And again, we use the word depression, and I'm not doing a biochemical diagnosis here, but what we commonly refer to as this down in the dumpsisms. And the Rebbe says, learn this chapter of Tanya. So if you're feeling a little down and you're feeling defeated and you're feeling like overwhelmed, well, this is a good place to start to try and remedy it. And again, it's demanding. You have to be in this positive framework. It's like we call what's being professional. Doesn't matter what's going on. When you walk into the job, the office, the classroom, you gotta reach down deep and put a positive smile on your face. The Alter Rebbe continues. Ki'im bezrizis. It has to come from enthusiasm. And we know this, intuitively we know this, that when somebody is excited about something, they're jumping up and down. So the kid doesn't want to go to school, you have to remind him 10 times to get out of bed. When it comes the first day of the trip that he's been waiting for, he can't wait, and he's up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's all enthusiastic and excited to get going. Hanimshechus, which comes, misimcha, from simcha. Now again, simcha is not just the product of pleasures, sensory stimulation, and that type of thing. It's not some naive sense of happy-go-lucky. It's not because if I do this, then I'm going to win, and so on. It's about a general attitude. And what is the fundamental premise of simcha? Is being alive. Alter Rebbe emphasizes this, and sadly, as we know in our society, this is sometimes a point that is challenged. But it is absolutely the position of Tanya that being alive is innately a great simcha. There is joy in being alive. And then the fact that we have a godly soul, and God has entrusted a part of himself to us. And the fact that we have the ability to be connected with Hashem and to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem through mitzvah observance. And time again. Again, just to use one illustration, we know that the previous Rebbe had a very physically hard life. He lived through the worst times of the Jewish people. World War I, the Communist Revolution, the Holocaust. Personally, he was arrested, physically abused. His daughter was murdered, his Hasidim, and so on. And yet, what did the Frierdiker Rebbe leave us as his final mimer? The world is the garden of Hashem. The world is a beautiful place. The world is the place where God longs to be. This is the emphatic point. So again, simcha is not silliness. Simcha is not the product of fun. Simcha is an attitude that is within your control, and that's very demanding. Even in we just began the month of Adar, and we say when the month of Adar comes in, we increase in joy. We also say when the month of Av, in the summer, comes in, we decrease in joy. But Hasidim would read it as, when the month of Av comes in, we decrease the sadness through joy. And just to illustrate that point, you know that we don't eat meat during the 9 days. But there is somewhat of a workaround that if you'll have a Sudas mitzvah, a meal associated with some mitzvah, then it is permissible to eat meat. Well, if you have a bris or a pidyon haben, and so on. Well, you can't always arrange those. So what can you do? Well, you can have a siyum, the completion of a volume of study of Torah. So even though in Chabad it is not our custom to eat meat at such a siyum, we still do a siyum. Why are we doing a siyum? Because that's a permissible form of simcha. And we explain that the sadness of the destruction of the temple is so deep that it can't be offset with meat and wine and music, which are standard ways of a person's feeling a little melancholy. You listen to some music, it kind of gets your adrenaline going. You have a nice meal, makes you happy, you feel much better. But when it's such a deep void of the destruction of the temple, you can't mask it with music and meat and wine. You got to reach deep down within you and find a greater form of simcha, and that's the simcha of Torah study. Again, the point being, we always have to be b'simcha. Even on Tisha B'Av, we are b'simcha in the proper way. And the proper way doesn't mean a muted simcha. It means a deeper level of simcha that is necessary to offset such a deep level of sadness and tragedy that we experienced with the story of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So here the Alter Rebbe says, where do we get this zrizis, this bounce in our step? We get it from psiches halev, from the opening of the heart. Again, unlike the paro and the clenched heart, it's the opening of the heart. By ridding ourselves of all remnants of worry or despondence in the world. Now, again, what do you mean? I got things I got to worry about. There's people we have to daven for, and there's material need, and there's psychological need, and there's physiological need. What does that mean? Just don't think, meaning we have to act upon it. There's a verse in Tehillim that reads, I was young and I have grown old, and I have never seen the righteous go without bread. Some people incorporate this in the end of their benching. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. So the great chassid Ramendel Futerfas, who lived through Soviet imprisonment and saw the brutality of the Soviets, was asked, how can we say such a pasuk? That I was young and I never saw a righteous man suffer? And Ramendel says, it's absolutely true. I never saw a righteous man suffer. I was always busy helping him. Don't watch him suffer, meaning, so worry, what is worry? Worry has to be a prompt to do something. But saying, I'm so worried, well, what are you doing about it? I'm going to worry some more. It's not going to alleviate the suffering or the sadness. So again, the Alter Rebbe is not saying, say la vie, some sort of let them eat cake dismissive. He's saying we have to rid ourselves of being obsessed with worry as if worrying is itself a virtue.
Rabbi Epstein?
Yes.
Sorry. So back to what you were saying before, you were talking about the worry. So is the Alter Rebbe saying that when whatever things in your life seem horrible, whatever it is, that Torah study is the fix? I'm trying.
Well, it's not just Torah study, meaning there's an old story about this man. He came to, I think it was Reb Zusha, I'm not sure, and he said, I need money and I'm in a bad way. He says, we're going to help you and we're going to go to my brother. So he goes to his brother says, I'm going to daven for him. He says, don't daven for him, go collect money for him. Meaning, it's not like, I have this terrible thing, I'm going to study the Chumash. But it means that I have to reorient my attitude. And I have to say, not what am I worried about, what am I going to do about it? What is the action that I'm going to take? Now, sometimes I can't fix it. I can only try and find some resource to help them fix it. Doesn't mean I don't know how to give the guy a root canal, but I know that if he has a toothache, he has to go to the dentist. So I'm not going to say, well, let me do it for you. But I might say, well, here's a list of 7 dentists that I know, or here's some other form of remedy. So again, the worry, it feels sometimes very virtuous. Oh, I'm so worried. What are you doing about it? I'm going to worry about it some more. It's not going to help the issue. There's got to be an action item. And that comes from this sense of zrizos. What is our impulse? Is our impulse to get out of the way, or is our impulse to dive in and help fix it? And that's what we're trying to train ourselves, which is because at a certain point, worrying is really about me. It's not about them, because they're not helped by my worrying. Okay. Now the Alter Rebbe anticipates again what I was saying before about the attitude that exists, and I'm talking about within Torah people, that sadness or this awareness of all the worries of the world is somehow some special virtue, and it should be pursued, and it should be revered. Wow, what a special guy. Look how glum and sad he is. It says that in all suffering there is profit. This seems to be like something to pursue, that there is greatness in this atzvus. And again, atzvus is sadness, suffering, not suffering, but despondence, and so on and so forth. So what about that? What are you telling me? Peirush, what does this mean? That there's some sort of virtue here. There's something great to be found. Like I said, this man is so serious. Look at him. He's always glum, and he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's truly a person to be admired. And this guy is laughing and smiling. He's not a serious person. He's sort of naive and Pollyannish. So we continue and we say, the Alter Rebbe says, no, you're misunderstanding this. What this really is suggesting from this phraseology is that this Eitzev, this despondence, this despair, this, again, sometimes it's called depression, is not innately virtuous. But it can produce something positive post facto. Something good can come from it after the fact. V'hainu, and what is that? Hasimcha amiti is b'Hashem aleikav haba achar ha'etzav ha'amiti litim mizumanim al v'noisa b'mar nafshay v'leiv nishbar. That the joy and the celebration that can come, that is genuine and enduring, as a consequence of having genuine atzvis. Now, again, here we're really nuancing out the word. How do we know if it's a healthy form of, again, not just being naive or dismissive or, oh, well, remember the first chapter of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe quoted the statement from the Gemara that a person should be in their eyes like a Russia, and he asked the question, well, then a person's going to either be like, oh, forget it, what's the point of even trying? Or, hey, so what? Neither one of those is going to be a good attitude. So what then is the objective here? What is the sweet spot that we're trying to hit? And here the Alter Rebbe describes it, that we have to have, remember this phrase, itim mizumanim, designated times, special times, when a person can do some real harsh self-analysis, really start to understand where potentially their missteps are, where there are things that need to be sort of reprimanded, and where the person can be honest with himself and where they can really get harsh with themselves. That will result in, and again, this is the key part, Nishbara ruach hatuma v'sitra achra mechitza shel bayis hamafsekes beinay loviv shabashamayim. That he will be able to respond with this broken spirit. Now, again, in English, when we say a person has a broken spirit, we mean the person has given up. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about breaking, like breaking open the heart. Paro has a clenched heart, a hardened heart like a stone. And when we say a broken heart, we don't mean like, oh, he broke my heart, I'm so disappointed. We mean broken open. It's receptive. It's wide open. It's sensitized. It's energized. That's what we mean by broken, not broken in the harsh or sort of derogatory or negative way. So it's important because the English phrase is very different implication than the Torah phrase. Like it says in the Zohar, al pasuk ruach nishbara leiv nishbar. What does it mean, a broken spirit and a broken heart? It means, again, that's the pasuk that we saw before from chapter 51 in Tillim, the broken spirit and the broken heart is because, because remember in pasuk 10 that we saw in the beginning, chapter 51, the broken spirit is pasuk 19, but that's what it said earlier, tasmiini sosim simcha, that we have to be celebratory. We should hear the joy and celebration that is the byproduct. So how do we know if the atzvis, the self-beating up, so to speak, is healthy or not, what's the consequence? Is the consequence, well, forget it. What's the point of even trying? Because no matter what I do, I'm still Russia and I'm still far from Hashem and I can't ever do anything right, et cetera, et cetera. Or is the consequence, yes, I'm going to get better. I'm going to improve. I'm not going to continue down this path. I know my strengths. I know that I can do better, and I'm going to get the pep in my step, and away we go. That's the indicator, because the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh HaBahamis thrive on that give upness. What's the point of trying? Just give up. And again, this is judgmental, and we're not talking about biochemical, but that attitude is really self-indulgent, because the consequence is I don't have to do anything. I can't help anybody. I'm incapable. I can't do anything. Now, we all know about the person who's a little overly confident, and then they're doing things that they're not, they're doing the root canal when they can't really do root canals. But we don't want the guy to say, well, you can't expect me to help anybody. I can't help anybody. I'm worthless. I'm not a good person. They're just self-absorbed. They're just completely and totally self-absorbed. And it's the tool of the Yetzer Hara. Baruch Nadiva, then we become more committed and more devoted. Sasa v'simcha heshiva li sasa yishaecha baruch nadiva. V'zeu tama pashid l'tikan Arizal loimer mizmar zeh hatikan chatzos kaidem alima. And this is what the Arizal meant when he established a practice that we should read this first. We're going to come back to this and analyze some of the individual words. I want to get the full idea first. That a person, again, tikkun chatzos, which I don't know people who practice this anymore, but it was a somewhat common practice that people would arise literally at midnight, because that's when we go from darkest and starts to work towards dawn. So there's a certain sense that it's like the end of the suffering and moving towards the joy. And people would read a series of prayers mourning the destruction of the temple. And in it, the Arizal added this chapter of Tehillim. What is this chapter of Tehillim's particular relevance to this idea of Tikkun Chatzos? That we have to understand, we're not just sitting on the floor so we can be sad. We're not just sitting here so that we can feel the sort of righteousness of sadness. We're in the sadness so that we will emerge with greater joy. And just to go back to the Tisha B'Av analogy, the 15th of Av is called the most joyous day in the calendar. Now, the 15th of every month, the moon is full. So why is it specially celebratory on the 15th of Av more than the 15th of any other month? And the answer is because we hit such a low with Tisha B'Av, we better rebound, not just back to normal. We don't just want to go from -1 to 0. We want to go to +1. So the rebound, the consequence has to be greater and added celebration. And if it's not, then we got to really do a self-check on, is this atzvus genuine, or is it a little bit of feeling sorry for myself and self-pity? And it's a harsh term because there are real things to be worried about, but what then is the mission of this concern? What then are we going to do about it? And if it invigorates us to do more, then it's a positive. If it makes us feel so frustrated to throw my hands up in despair, then it's a negative. And that's the simcha amitius b'Hashem, that there's true simcha. What's the simcha? Not that my problems have gone away, and not that I got some sort of stimulus or that I'm pretending that they're gone. It is the simcha in Hashem. That's the key point, that it's in Hashem that comes after it. Sheish l'simcha zoi yisrain, ki yisrain ha'or haba min ha'choshech dafka. And that is the greater consequence, like, and here's another pasuk that we saw before from Shlomo HaMelech, I have seen the superiority of light over darkness, and in that earlier we said, like the superiority of intellect over foolishness, that there's no such thing as it's so dark that I can't light a candle and make it light, and the light will always defeat darkness. Here, the Alter Rebbe is putting another nuance on the phrase that the light comes from the darkness. It's not just light over darkness, that light is more preferable and more powerful than darkness. It's light that comes out of the darkness. So if God forbid a person is in a dark space and they are in that moment and they're feeling all of that sadness, and it's genuine, again, when nobody is dismissing the sincerity of the person's circumstance, and then they lift out and they discover the godliness that is there, it turns around and it becomes a prompt, it becomes a spur to get them to do more. They have now discovered the light in the darkness, which is a greater light than light without the darkness. Like the Zohar explains on that pasuk. Again, we referenced it earlier in Tanya, when Shlomo HaMelech says, I have seen the superiority of wisdom over foolishness, like the superiority of light over darkness. And it's a clear pasuk that advocates for this. We're going to go back over the words, but I want to get the idea. Now here is the key illustration. There, Hashem is speaking about, God forbid, all these unpleasant things that will befall the Jewish people. And what's the reason why it will befall them? So you say, well, they didn't do what they were told. No, that's not the entirety of it. It says in the pasuk explicitly, because you did not serve Hashem your God, bisimcha. Now, there's two ways of reading that. One way of reading it is, you didn't serve Hashem when you had all these great things. As we know, sometimes a person has all these great things and they can forget about Hashem. One of the reasons why Torah insists only on saying brachas after reading, what we call the benching. Remember, brachas before reading is a rabbinic idea. The bracha afterwards is because when a person is hungry, then they are more commonly driven to Hashem, please help me out. Once they've eaten and be satisfied, what can happen, as the Torah says, they wax corpulent and they forget God. So therefore we say, hey, don't forget to bench after you've eaten, not just before you ate, not just, oh, Hashem, help me out. But even after you've eaten, don't forget to bench, don't forget to thank Hashem in that special moment, post facto, after you have eaten. And so the Alter Rebbe reads that not one way of reading it is that you didn't serve Hashem when you had abundance, but another way of reading it is, what, God forbid, brings all this unpleasantness? Because you didn't serve Hashem, not just when you had simcha, but you didn't serve Hashem with simcha. You served Hashem, you did it, you did all the mitzvahs. You ate kosher and you gave tzedakah and you davened and you shook the lulav and the matzah was the most matzah of matzah and your maror was the bitterest of marors, but you didn't do it with simcha, you didn't do it with joy. And again, just at the human level, we've all had people do us a favor, like they're doing you a favor, and then you have people who do you a favor with passion, enthusiasm, and joy. It's the same favor. The experience is very different, but it's the same physical action. But the experience is very different. So now, based on this, I want to go back and look at that pasuk, because that pasuk, in all suffering, there is profit, is a guiding light, and again, that the Alter Rebbe is coming to push back against. And maybe, hopefully, you haven't encountered it, but I can tell you that this exists out there in Torah people, not just to sort of put on a happy face, but that there is somehow virtue in, oh, he's always so worried and he's got so much on his mind. And wow, this guy is really serious. And not like a bunch of, silly people who are just happy-go-lucky. So I want to go back now to that pasuk. So it's a bunch of lines back. I know we are not going to read through the whole thing, but I want to look at each one. So the phrase reads, B'chol eitzav yehei moisar. Standard translation, in all sadness, despondence, there is profit. Again, commonly it was understood to mean that there is virtue in being glum. Let's put it that way. And the Alter Rebbe came and said, no, the point is that it will produce. There's a saying, as if you're peeling onions, you might as well do tshuva. Meaning, anyways, you're crying, you might as well do tshuva. Meaning, it should bring to it, not that it is in and of itself. So how does the Alter Rebbe read it? So he says like this. There is, in the Bechol, in the standard, so to speak, atzvis, this sort of glumness, or as it's literally translated in the pasuk, it's in all labor, this laboriousness. What's the difference between a farmer and a gardener? One guy, it's his job. The other guy, it's his passion. It's the same thing, but it's about the attitude. It's about the approach. So the Alter Rebbe says that since the source of this despondence is Timtum Alev, this clutched heart, this sense that it comes from this somewhat of a harsh attitude. So what's the antidote to that? You got to have an open heart. You got to break open the heart. There's got to be joy. There's got to be expanse. There's got to be pep in your step. There's got to be life. There's got to be enthusiasm. So Eitzev can mean labor. It can mean this sort of depressing thing, like the grumpy laborer who's just grumpy all the time and bitter and angry and so on, and he's lost any sense of joy. Or it can be a spur to something greater. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to address this term with sort of two terms. We're going to categorize one as this term atzvis, which again I'm translating as despondence, despair, depression, all of that. And then there's another one called meriris. Now, meriris in English is translated as bitter, like maror, but it's in English, I think, when someone's bitter, they're like angry and so on. It doesn't mean that. It means like a certain sense of disappointment in self. But again, the difference is, what is the consequence? Is it, well, therefore I give up. What's the point of even trying? Or I got pep in my step and I'm enthusiastic because I'm going to change. Why do we eat maror on Pesach? On Pesach, we're about celebrating the Exodus. Why eating maror? Because we have to, empathize with people who have bitterness in their life. And that gives us a greater appreciation for the wine, for the celebration, for the liberation. Because if we don't remember the maror, again, we wind up being like spoiled. We're like, oh my gosh, I have to fly commercial. This is terrible. I got the middle seat. My Alta Zaidi sat on a boat for 3 weeks, and I got to sit in the middle seat, and I'm ready, oismensch. So a little bit, we got to understand what the meriris is, so that, again, it becomes a launching pad for genuine celebratory simcha. So what are we reading this? B'chol Eitzav. That is, in all Eitzav, not just the standard Eitzav, the sort of I give upness, but we got to dig deep to find that genuine side that's going to spur. How do I know whether it's healthy or not? Consequence. What is the outcome of it? What is the result? If the result is I give upness, it's unhealthy. If the result is I'm going to change it and make it better, it's very healthy. So yihya, in all Eitzav, yihya, there will be in the future, not the atzvis itself, this glum attitude is not the virtue. And again, I know it sounds incredibly obvious, or I hope it sounds incredibly obvious. It doesn't always feel so incredibly obvious in Torah places. In Torah places, I mean, to give an extreme, even on Purim, there are some people, I don't like all of this singing, and don't you know? And again, I can list all kinds of terrible things that that a person can be upset about. And again, it's not like, well, I don't know that, I don't want to think about that. The antidote to that has got to be, again, invigorated, enthusiastic. It's all in your attitude, which is really the only thing we can control anyway. And that's the profit. The profit is the simcha that comes as a consequence. Now, the rest of the perek, the Alter Rebbe is going to be using these two terms. Atzvis, again, despondence, all those, meriris. What is the difference? So we're going to categorize them. That atzvis is what atzvis can do, we are told, is worse than what an avera can do. Person does an avera, it's in the moment. I'm not recommending it, and I'm not dismissing it as inconsequential, but atzvis will destroy it much worse. It's like if you speak to a dentist, eating candy is bad for your teeth. You know what's worse for your teeth? Grinding your teeth because of worry and concern. But again, we're not advocating eating candy. It's bad. But eating candy, you brush your teeth, it's gone. You stop eating candy. But if a person grinds their teeth, that will do more damage than all the candy could ever do. So what atzvis, the tool of the, like they say, anger is the cocaine of the devil or something like that. Atzvis is one of the powerful tools of the Yetzer Hara because it winds up just making you despondent and despair. Just give up. And again, this sounds harsh and it's judgmental. It's also self-absorbed. I'm so sad. I'm so horrible. Oh, life is terrible. Life is horrible. It's horrible. And what is the consequence? I sit on the couch and do nothing. And it just leads me to what's the point of even trying? Why should I even try? Just like physiologically, a person can say, "Oh, I'm so broken. I'm so what's the point of trying? Why should I even try? It's over." And then, right, that it becomes self-fulfilling. That's basically what's going to happen. It's just going to keep on happening and it's going to become self-fulfilling. What then is Mariris? What's the positive sign? And again, they look the same. They look almost identical, indistinguishable. So it's interesting. I mean, just in my own sort of Googling around, I couldn't find a good English word for Mariris. It's all negative. I mean, all those terms, bitter and so on, there is no concept in English about where a person is self-analytical and is disappointed in themselves and then is charged to go forward. Maybe it's this sort of 1970s, I'm okay, you're okay mentality where we never want to say anything is unpleasant or anything is less than perfect. And we don't want to be critical of ourselves and you're good and you're fine just the way you are. So we don't like that. Or it's this sort of military harshness, you're the lowest form of life and so on and so forth. But in Torah, it is a healthy self-analysis. And one of the key factors is something that we touched on, which we'll talk about in greater detail, is it's initiated. It's not accidental. If it sneaks up on you, dismiss it. If you're going to do and sit down and do a true self-analysis, every evening before bed, every week before Shabbos, every month of Rosh Chodesh, every year, the whole month of Elul, and so on. Now, we're going to have to do some analysis. What's the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant? The bookkeeper tells you what's going on. The accountant tells you what's going on, and he has some meaning to it. It's not just a bunch of data. So it's a harsh thing. I don't like doing it either. Who wants to see the video of their day? And I wasted time here, and I lost my temper there, and I was silly there, and I missed an opportunity here. But without doing it, life goes on. It's not waiting for you. So Mariris is self-initiated. And that's why it is concerned with what is missing. And as we would say, don't think about what I'm missing. Think about what other people are missing from me. So instead of saying, well, I didn't get this and I didn't get that, why don't we say, well, no one got this from me and no one got that from me. No one said hello to me. Well, who did you say hello to? Nobody did this for me. Well, who did you do that for? And again, the key distinction is proof is in the consequence. It motivates me to action. Atzvis motivates me to give up. What's the point of even trying? Mariris motivates me to dig deep and keep on going. And it always has this idea of simcha. And again, as we said, simcha is not naivete, and it's not silliness, and it's not the product of joys and stimulations, which we know only last temporarily. It's about an attitude. And that's really the message that this chapter is conveying. It's about your attitude, which is the only thing we can control anyway. All is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven, which is our attitude. I cannot control what happens to me, only how I respond to it. That's a quote from Zusha Vanapol. All right, we'll stop here and continue next Avah.